Hello, everybody. We are live. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Content at the Davis Finney Foundation, and I am really excited to be here today. Wait, why isn't your name showing up with Kuhan? Kuhan, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, nice to be here.
Good. I don't understand why your name's not showing up, but that is not helpful.
Ah,
Um, huh. Well, we'll have to see later. So great. It's really great to be with you. Let me see who introduced me to you. Naynad introduced me to you.
yes,
Great.
yeah.
So big fan of Naynad. How do you know him?
Likewise. We just connected through the Parkinson's community. One of the blessings of sort of having this condition, if I can put it like that, is you come across all kinds of wonderful, inspirational people, and I very much put an into that category.
Yeah. Oh, he's so great. Hi,
He's
Audrey. Thanks for
wonderful.
being here today. Anyone who has questions for Kuhan can put it in the live chat area. That would be great. So, for those of you who don't, for people in our community who don't know you very well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, pre-Parkinson's? What was your life like? What'd you do? And then how did the diagnosis process go? And I'm going to throw something up when we get to that point. That is a really cool graphic that you created for us to share.
Sure, yeah. It's interesting when I recount my story now. It's pre and post Parkinson's, isn't it? It's a bit surreal to divide my life like that. And like many, I don't really like to be defined by the condition, but it is what it is. So I'm Kuhan. I'm 48 years old, and I've been living with Parkinson's, or at least the diagnosis of it, for the last 10 years or so. I'm from London in the UK, and I've lived here most of my life. I was born and raised here. My family originally from Sri Lanka. They moved over here decades ago, and I spent most of my life, or about half of my adult life, in the UK, and the other half working elsewhere in different parts of Europe and Asia and the Middle East. And work for me was, and again, something that I don't like to be defined by my work, but in terms of what I was used to do as a profession, and I no longer do that, and I'm sure we'll come on to that as to how Parkinson's affected my work. But I was in product management roles in the telecoms industry, so working for large companies, office-based roles. It paid the bills, and I was very much of the ethos that I would work to live, in terms of it was a means to an end, as opposed to living to work. I was never one that was consumed by work, and the Parkinson's diagnosis gave me an additional reset opportunity, which I took. So that career is behind me, as it were, and I try to be one that looks forward, not back. Yeah.
Great. And then, so you're working that job, I assume, working in that, and then you kind of go through this Parkinson's
Yeah,
experience. Let me see if I
yeah.
can get this up. For some reason, it's not cooperating with me, but I really want to get it up because it's a really great picture.
Oh,
Where did it go? Okay, you can start. I will make this work.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little depiction of my 10-year journey. I had my 48th birthday last month, and the
Oh,
following day was my 10-year Parkinson's anniversary, my Parkiversary, of my diagnosis. And so it's always a bit of a strange time of year for me. Mixed feelings, mixed emotions. A birthday followed by a reminder of my diagnosis. And oh, right, great. We can see what my 10 years look like very roughly, very crudely, in this depiction. And it started with me. I was sat in an office, actually, and I noticed, as my hands were resting on the keyboard, I noticed a tremor in my left hand, and most of my symptoms are left-sided, and I'm left-handed as well. And I noticed this tremor. I didn't really think much of it, to be honest with you, because it would come and go, and didn't really affect my life. It wasn't affecting my work, wasn't affecting my personal life. most of the time I was oblivious to it. Just every so often I'd notice it. And I went to a doctor here in the UK initially, and I went to the doctor about something else and asked him about the tremor, almost in a kind of apologetic way, but I didn't want to bring it up. I don't want to impose on your time. I don't want to impose full stop, but kind of just mention this tremor to you. And by the way, when I recount this story, or rather when I hear others recount their story, I'm amazed by how common this story is. Initially, I thought I had quite an unusual path, but I think my diagnosis and maybe my subsequent path is something that is common to a lot of people, but by the sounds of it. So yeah, initially it was dismissed. I went back to the doctor again a few months later, and this was about something else this time. And
so let me just interject. That's just your primary care doctor?
Yeah, that's
okay,
my.
So he was just like,
my GP.
Really no experience probably with anything that would look like a pinky tremor or something.
Yeah, exactly. No experience, and also no notion that it could affect somebody that was 38 years old, otherwise young, fit, and healthy, both physically and mentally. So and to be fair, that was his mindset, but it was also my mindset as well. I didn't think Parkinson's. I didn't think neurology. I thought it's initially he told me to stop drinking coffee. Maybe it was caffeine related, but it turns out it wasn't. I had some blood tests done at that point. So we're sort of 3 months in now, and it revealed a thyroid condition, an over or underactive thyroid. And there's a particular type of thyroid condition that a tremor is a symptom of the condition. So the doctor put 2 and 2 together and assumed it was to do with the thyroid. And we left it at that. The thyroid condition sort of cleared up by itself, but I was left with a tremor. But again, it wasn't really bothering me, and I hadn't noticed any other symptoms at that time. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, but when I look back now, I had a whole host of symptoms that were Parkinson's related. But what triggered me to go to see the doctor was the tremor. And like I said, it wasn't really bothering me. And fast forward another few months, I was in Thailand, where I used to have a second home. I used to do a bit of volunteering work there, and I ended up seeing a doctor again about something else for like an annual physical routine stuff. And again, in a very sort of humble, apologetic way, I said, can I just take 5 minutes of your time and ask you about this tremor? And she had a different reaction. She referred me to a neurologist, and she was more concerned, shall we say, and which made me a little bit concerned. And fortunately, I didn't have to wait very long between seeing her and seeing the neurologist. And I turned up at the hospital in the neurology department, and I remember sitting there waiting, and lots of other people around me, and mainly older than me, and various conditions. I presume a lot of them were Parkinson's patients, and none of them were really sort of looking at me, or if they were looking at me, they weren't smiling at me, which I thought was really odd at the time. But it was only years later, and when I learned that Parkinson's affects facial expression and the ability to smile, and whereas I'd been used to, especially in Thailand, in Asia, that very friendly people, very warm and welcoming. I was very used to the smiles, but I wasn't getting the smiles that time, and it caused me a little bit more stress at the time. And anyway, the neurologist, the movement disorder specialist, came to meet me in the waiting room, I should say, and which initially I thought was really nice of her. But what she wanted to do was actually observe my movement, observe my gait, my walking pattern, my stride length, whether my arm was swinging or not, which it wasn't. She wanted to see what it was like for me getting from the waiting room to her office. And for me, it was all fine. I was oblivious to all these symptoms. I didn't realize my arm wasn't swinging, which sounds crazy.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to ask that. So you had no idea, and it was just one arm. You didn't know.
I had no idea, and it wasn't always. Sometimes it was swinging, sometimes it wasn't. I remember going home that day, after seeing her and after getting the initial diagnosis and looking in front of the mirror and walking up and down the room. And sure enough, that my arm wasn't swinging, but I was oblivious to it. And I think particularly in young onset Parkinson's, where the progression can be quite slow, sometimes it's not obvious that you're being impacted, and sometimes it's not obvious it's related to Parkinson's. Even now, sometimes I'll wake up with something, a little twinge in my back or whatever it is, and it'll be fairly innocuous. But when I think about these things and put two and two together, then I can sort of relate it back to the Parkinson's. So after I got my initial diagnosis and the shock that entailed, a lot of the feelings I felt was relief, because all these things that were unanswered in my life before, in terms of health worries and health anxiety, suddenly sort of lifted, because I was able to sort of give it a name, and I was able to understand it. And don't get me wrong, it was a roller coaster of emotions. I was really shocked and in disbelief early on, and I was quite distraught and asking her lots of questions about the future. And I always pictured myself what I'd be like in 10 years' time. And she couldn't give me any answers as to the trajectory of the condition, which I found frustrating at the time. But to be fair to her, the condition is different for everybody, and there's no way she could predict what I'd be like in 10 years' time. Although she did say one thing as I was leaving her office on that initial consultation, that initial diagnosis, because she could see I was quite upset, and she said, "Look, it's possible in 10 years' time you can come back and see me, and to the layperson, they wouldn't know that you had Parkinson's." And I didn't believe her. I just assumed in 10 years' time I'll be in a wheelchair or struggling to walk, struggling to talk, wouldn't be going out the house. I'd be, all the kind of worst case scenarios had entered my mind. And to be fair, a lot of that was fed from what I'd read, by referring to the other doctor, Dr. Google, which is it's a terrible habit. But in the absence of other information, and there wasn't a lot of information available at the time, I took to the internet, and I kept reading things about in 5 to 7 years time you start to become more resistant to the medication, or condition progresses such that you'd have to take more medication, and then you'll get to the next stage, and then dyskinesia will kick in, and your cognition might be impacted, and all this. And I was like plotting a timeline in my mind. I was mapping it all out, and it's been nothing like that. It's been absolutely nothing like that. And reflecting back on 10 years,
it actually sounds like your product manager brain got in there and was like,
yeah.
I need to engineer this thing. How is this going to be?
Yeah, exactly. I was exactly. I was trying to rationalize things, which is very difficult to do when you get a diagnosis of a progressive condition, because all your emotions come to the fore. But I was trying to. It's not that I was trying to be optimistic or pessimistic. Yet I'm not really a glass half full or a half empty. I'm just, it's a glass of water. That's what it is. and I wanted to understand that. But the facts that I was presented with were all related to late onset Parkinson's, not young onset Parkinson's. And all of it was to do with the physical symptoms, and all of it was to do with medication, and none of it was to do with things like exercise and the holistic approach. None of it was to do with the non-motor symptoms. No one told me that disease progression can be slower. No one told me that there were certain things that are in my control. Good sleep, good exercise, good diet, and so on can go a long way. So in the absence of all that, I just defaulted to the worst. So reflecting back now, if I knew it was going to be like this 10 years ago, well, I would have taken that. I would have said, okay, well, that's not too bad. And Parkinson's has given me an opportunity to sort of reset my outlook on life as well. And I'd wish I'd sort of, had that sort of reset opportunity earlier in my life, but unfortunately,
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. How has it helped you change your perspective?
Well, I mean, just instantly, things just look different. I remember walking out that hospital on that day, and the world just seemed different to, half an hour before when I'd entered the hospital. The sights, the sounds, the smells, everything was like, I talk about a moment where it was like I was in a time lapse, like one of those movies where everything around you is going in fast motion in time lapse, but you're in normal speed, and you can suddenly see things in a way that you weren't able to see before, and that was refreshing for me. But it's also scary at the same time. But I call it a reset opportunity. Having said that, what then happened was I entered a sort of long period where I didn't really talk about the condition, and I was in this kind of phase between acceptance and denial, which I still flip between the two, and I found it. I found I was able to go on with life. I found like nothing had actually changed. I hadn't suddenly woken up with Parkinson's. Parkinson's isn't like that. I had learned that I had Parkinson's, but nothing had actually changed significantly from the day before. So in that sense, life went on. I was still able to do everything, and I was still able to go to work. I was still able to socialize. I was still able to travel. And again, this might have been a bit of denial, but I just moved on with life. And quite frankly, I could, because my symptoms weren't severe at the time. And the medication actually helped. So in a way, initially, I kind of got better, which sounds a bit strange.
Yeah. What medication did you go on originally?
It's the same medication that I'm on now, which is a type of levodopa. Madopar is the main one that I take, and a few other things have been thrown into the mix over the years, into the cocktail. And I started with 3 pills a day, and I'm now up to like 15 pills a day. And in a way, that's a way of charting my journey as well. But I'm on the same core medication that I was before at the start, and it's just increased over time.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you feel well managed on that?
I feel relatively well managed.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I've got to add something else into the mix, or up a dose, or when my dyskinesia kicks in, it's like you start to sort of have. Nobody wants to take pills, right? Nobody wants to, but the reality is that I need the medication to be able to get through my day. But I'm very conscious that there are trade-offs, and I can feel that. And I'm very conscious that, it's not a static thing. The disease will progress, and, things will get worse in a way. But the way I look at it is things might get worse in terms of the condition, but at least up until now, I get better at managing it, if I can put it like that. And I don't know how long that will continue, but, I sort of remain hopeful in that sense, in terms of a good quality of life. I know when people talk about hope in Parkinson's, normally it relates to a cure, and obviously I'd love that. But in the absence of that, I just hope that I can maintain a sort of good quality of life.
Yeah. So there's a lot I want to dig into from what you just said. I'd love to start. What happened in terms of relationships when you were diagnosed, the communication to, the significant people in your life, and then also how did you handle communicating about it at work?
Oh, well, the answer to all three is the same. I didn't. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell many friends. I didn't tell colleagues, employers. For the first 5 years, I could count on one hand the amount of people that I told I had this condition. And partly out of embarrassment, partly out of denial. And it worked for me initially. It probably went on too long in terms of, by the time I did come out, as it were. And I do think it's a coming out process. It probably was, I left it too long. It was easier to hide away. And I'd love to say that the time that I came out was a time that, I'd reached acceptance and I was comfortable with this. But the reality was I couldn't hide it any longer. I couldn't hide my symptoms. and it became more and more obvious, and it was taking more and more of a toll on me. It wasn't until year 7, year 8, this coincided with COVID and lockdown, that I became more informed about the condition, because initially I didn't want to know much more than the basics, and but also then I started connecting with others. I started reaching out, I started getting help. I was fortunate where I live. I was able to access a counsellor and a neurophysiotherapist and a neuro-occupational therapist, and I found that as soon as I not moved away from the neurologist, but moved away from only thinking that this is a condition that can be alleviated as somewhat by medication, and realised actually the power of exercise, it was a whole new world for me.
Yeah. So did you not really exercise for those initial 7 years?
No, I did, but I didn't realise that actually it was having an impact, a positive impact on the condition. And I'm a believer that things like exercise can help slow the condition in a way that medication can't, and without any of the side effects. But as soon as I started to realise how much, and as soon as I started to take note of how much, I would just make observations about, well, yesterday I'd gone for a long walk or a cycle ride, and today I feel a lot better. And I started realising that wasn't a coincidence. And I also started realising things like anxiety and stress caused my physical symptoms to get a lot worse. Put it this way, I realised very quickly that this condition highlights the link between the mind and the body, and how one influences the other. And I could feel that in everything I was doing. But unfortunately, because I was I isolated myself for many years, I wasn't able to benefit from social interaction. There's something peculiar about this condition that makes you quite insular. I was spending more and more time at home. I was, like I said, I didn't really tell many people. And when I did tell people, it always became a thing. It became it's never a 2-minute conversation. You can't just say you have Parkinson's and leave it at that. For me, in my mind, it was like a huge event, telling people. I can't remember where I was going with that, but I've lost my thought process. Probably due to my cognition being impacted. It's the middle or late afternoon here, and I've noticed that when I start to wear off, my speech and my thought process starts to slow down. Sometimes I think like living with this condition is like living in slow motion, not only physically but mentally as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of realizations.
Did it change, or how did it change what you thought about work and your career and where you go with that? And
I suddenly realized what was important, what wasn't important. And like I said, not that work was ever a top priority for me, but it was consuming a lot of my time and a lot of my energy. And a couple of years ago, I gave up that type of work, the office job, partly because I wanted to, and partly because the condition was taking a toll. I could still do a day's work, but I had to manage myself, and then at the end of the day, I wouldn't be left with much left in the tank. So I started sort of resenting that somewhat, and I thought, well, there's more to life here. And fortunately, I was in a position that I was able to quit regular type of work and do other things now that I find a lot more rewarding, and again opportunities that would never have presented themselves if I hadn't had this condition.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of those? What are the things that you're spending your time on these days?
Well, a few things, and again, this is all directly attributable to Parkinson's. I've turned into a bit of an amateur photographer. So I'm one of these people that either because of the condition or the side effects of the medication, I've developed a creative streak, and I take lots of photos, which I get a lot of passion from. And I do a bit of make a little bit of pocket money out of that, just selling some photos or doing some photography work. So I find that really rewarding. And everything else really is now focused on the Parkinson's community. I've inadvertently turned into sort of an advocate. It wasn't intended. I'm not normally used to sort of talking about myself. I'm normally quite private and wouldn't normally do this sort of thing. But, I somewhat feel like I have a responsibility to spread the word, as it were. And that's what I'm doing. And I do a bit of volunteering work. I work with a local neuro charity that who provided me with the physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and so on. And I decided to give back by way of running a young person's group for them, because I realised we were under catered for in terms of a support network. So I thought, if no one else is going to do it, I'll put my hand up. And I do some work with Parkinson's UK, a few different things, including shaping their race equality work stream, which is all about bringing or bridging the gap, shall we say, in terms of involvement in research from people from ethnically diverse communities who the data shows are underrepresented quite significantly in Parkinson's research. And it's not specific to Parkinson's. But
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience with that. So what have you been learning? Based on, have you been a part of any clinical trials? And then, through this work, what have you discovered that you think people can do to change that?
Well, the first thing is I was quite naive. I assumed that all forms of research involved taking an experimental drug and or something that had some risk associated with it. And again, this was during lockdown times that I was able to do things online, that I started to realize actually research is a lot more than that. And I haven't taken part in any drug trials, but I've taken part in trials and research activity. And a lot of the time it's, it might just be as simple as filling out a survey or being part of a focus group. And I found I got involved in that, and I found it quite rewarding as well, because you get to meet others in the community, you get to be more informed about the condition, and the whole feeling of giving back is also part of that acceptance process. Well, it was for me anyway, and I found a lot of joy in that. But yeah, there are parts of the community that are underrepresented, clearly, particularly people from the South Asian origin, which is where my heritage is from. There's a huge embarrassment factor, more than just embarrassment. It's, they feel ashamed, and because of that, they tend to isolate in the way that I was describing, but perhaps more pronounced than perhaps other communities. And the net result of that is that they don't, not only do they not, are they doing themselves an injustice, but also, the research community is losing out as well. And I say all this because I'm pretty sure, just like my age and my gender, my ethnicity is playing a role in the type of Parkinson's that I have. And we won't really know that until, we get more numbers. Research is a numbers game, I always think, and there just aren't enough people in the relevant pots to be able to draw these firm conclusions. So that's what sort of drove me onto that. And and the other advocacy stuff I do is I've made a few videos about my journey, which that was really part of my coming out, or my way of telling my world anyway, my small world, that I had this condition. And off the back of that, I've started a podcast with another friend of mine, another Parkinson's friend of mine, called Two Parkies in a Pod,
Yes.
which is really also quite rewarding.
Is it TWO or two, the number two?
The number two Parkies in a Pod .com, or it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
And each spell it out for people.
Great. And each episode we have different guests on, and we have different topics, and again, by way of giving back, and again by way of getting some positive energy from it.
What are some of the interesting conversations, or what have you learned by talking to, so many different people living with it, that you are able to share with those in your community and the work that you're doing with advocacy?
Well, I've realized that the one common denominator, I think awareness is so low, not only outside the Parkinson's world, and that's frustrating for us Parkies when we have to try and explain this condition to the outside world, if I can put it like that, but also within the community. There are a lot of misconceptions, and the vast majority of people don't take part in research, for example, and in most instances it's not because they're wary of taking part in the clinical trials, for example. It's because they're simply not aware of the opportunity. They're simply not aware of where to go, and I think simple signposting can help. Talking to others with the condition, I find empathy always beats sympathy, and when you talk to somebody else with the condition, it's weirdly comforting. You don't want them to be in any distress or any pain. You don't want them to have this condition, but when you hear a story that's almost identical to yours in a lot of cases, or you hear people going through the same sorts of challenges, it's weirdly comforting, so in a way I take heart from that. Whenever I try to explain to a non-Parky what it's like to live with the condition, I always think to myself, I wouldn't wish this condition on them, but if they can just live in my shoes just for a day, just to understand that the sheer enormity and range of symptoms that this condition presents, then it should be so much easier than just explaining it. And that's why I think when you talk to other Parkies, there's something special about that. So and the podcast, we've covered various topics. The last one, for example, we did last week was about we interviewed a neuropsychologist, and we were talking about a lot of these themes around anxiety and mood fluctuations and fatigue and apathy and things like things that terms that are kind of like we're aware of, but I never really understood. So I never really understood the difference between fatigue and tiredness, for example. I thought my fatigue, I thought I could help with sleep, but that's not the case. Fatigue can hit you at any time in Parkinson's, whether it's physical or mental fatigue, and sleep doesn't always help. And in the same way, apathy, I always thought I was quite lazy. And until I realized actually it's not laziness, it's apathy. And when I realized, I'm not, it's not just me, I became more forgiving of myself in a way. I thought, well, hang on a sec, I'm going through this, and this is a real thing. It's a big thing. And I found, I was more forgiving of myself in a way that, not that I was hard on myself before, but I began to see there were certain things I could control and certain things I couldn't control, and I suddenly had an explanation for many things, and all of that I found quite comforting. And the more I talk to others about it, the more I realize, I'm not alone, and there are ways that I can navigate through Parkinson's, and it's not the end of the world as well. So when I meet people that have been living with the condition for longer than me and still maintain a positive outlook on life, I find that really quite rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Naynad. Hi, Naynad. He says, so well spoken, for sure. Audrey says, love pods, can't wait to subscribe. That's good. You have a new subscriber now.
Fantastic.
So I'd love for you to walk us through a little bit what your typical day is like. What are the things that you're doing to live well? What are the challenges that you have that you really need to spend a little bit more time on? Or, are you doing regular PT, OT, that kind of thing? Love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think probably the first thing to say is there is no typical day in Parkinson's, at least not for me. Just like no two people with Parkinson's are the same, no 2 days are the same, and no 2 hours are the same as well, particularly as the condition progresses and you start to experience on-off symptoms. So it's very frustrating to be able to plan a day. And I sometimes when a healthcare professional tells me, oh, you need a routine, absolutely get that, but I also roll my eyes at the same time, because when you're battling with fatigue and sleep issues, and apathy and all the rest of it, all the physical symptoms, routine is it's a really impossible thing to manage. It's very, very difficult. So I try to work on my sleep. I try to eat healthier. I try to exercise as much as possible, but it's not daily. But it's more frequent than before, and it's more. I do different types of exercises to what I was doing before. Before, I used to run a bit and play soccer and things like this, but now I can't do those things. So I play tennis, which is a bit lighter on the body, but also things like strength work, which I never really considered before. Not that I was a huge gym goer or am now, but I realised the benefit of strength work. For the times that I need to get up off the sofa or turn around in bed, I realise actually strength is an important thing, as is balance. I never used to think about doing balance exercises, and a lot of this is thanks to my physiotherapist, who enlightened me as to how targeted exercise can help. But also, I've never been averse to exercise. I'm quite fortunate in that way. I realise for a lot of people, exercise is a new thing for them, but I just try to remain active and try to do something every day. And I don't know what the day will look like, and I'm okay with that as well. And I'm okay that every day is different. I would like a little bit more routine. I would like to particularly with exercise, I'd like to do things on a more regular schedule. The one thing I have done is signed up for a yoga Parkinson's class. It's a group class, and I always say that the only thing better than exercise is group exercise, because you get the benefit of the physical and emotional benefits of the exercise, but also you're connecting with other people. You build that social connection, and it's very important, because I spent long periods where I was not going out so much and not meeting people, and it's a vicious circle, because you eat poorly, you're sleeping poorly, you've got this sedentary lifestyle, which is the worst thing for the condition. So yeah, it's a challenge every day, but I would say every day is different.
Yeah. One of the interesting you had said about apathy, one of our favorite speakers, Dr. Greg Pontone, he's a neuropsychiatrist from Johns Hopkins, but his philosophy is that to help people with apathy there's nothing more important than routine and schedule, because if it's just go do this thing, there's no like, you don't really get to have a opinion about it. You just have to go do it. And the more you get it regular, like the more you can be like, well, okay. And, sometimes it's really helpful to get, like you said, you sign up for something so that you're accountable to it, or you work out with a partner and they're waiting for you out the door, right? So those are super helpful.
I think the group thing and the partner thing, the buddy thing, I think helps with that motivation, absolutely. But what I would say is sometimes certain things are easier said than done in Parkinson's. And I know that routine is important. I know that exercise is important. I know that sleep is important. But doing those things for somebody with Parkinson's, ironically, all those activities are a real challenge. We know we'll get benefit from them. I know I'll have tomorrow will be a much better day if I can get a good 8 hours sleep tonight. I know that. But will I get it or not? That's a different thing, So
I think that's interesting, because I actually I often, because sleep is, it's difficult for everybody, add Parkinson's, and it's just phenomenally more difficult. But I think about myself with sleep, and my doctors will say, just do this. I've never slept. I don't think since the day I was born. I just don't sleep. And do this, do that. And I'm like, that's adorable. I can't, like, trust me, I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to do the things, but then I imagine, oh, what if that was for everything? which is what it
Yeah.
is for Parkinson's,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
What
it's a
if
good way
my
to put it.
ability to say I'm going to go do it applied
Yeah,
to work and exercise and thinking and talking,
yeah,
all of those things, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I 100% appreciate that. I'm definitely not trying to minimize
yeah.
how hard it
And
is. Um,
the
but
rare days now that I wake up after a good night's sleep, it's so precious for me that I will try and do as much as I can in that day. I'm like, right, this doesn't come along very often, and I'm thinking about all the things I can squeeze in, or even if it's a more regular day for me, I try to squeeze in things that I can do during my on period.
Mhm.
Whereas I know during my off period, I won't be able to do those things. So, and again, on off doesn't really respect a schedule either,
No.
so really much of the time. But at least I can block out, the morning, afternoon, evening. They're quite distinct for me. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm I'm at my best in the morning, so I'll try and do this sort of thing, or anything that's vaguely work related, or even exercise in the morning. Afternoon is a bit of downtime for me because it's that's when my daytime sleepiness and fatigue and apathy really kicks in.
Mhm.
So I take a little siesta at that time, and in the evening I tend to be a little bit more. Some of my creative juices get going. So
Mhm.
I try and do something with a creative hat on. So I try to divide my day up in that way, if not hour by hour, at least by those broad segments.
So you said that you kind of went from about 3 pills to about 15 pills a
Hmm.
day. What percentage would you say, and again, I know every day is different, but how much time are you kind of spending off on any given day? And then have you tried any of the new therapies for, sort of just dealing with off, like, in addition to your current, Cinemet or
Yeah, so I take a couple of other things. So entacapone and amantadine specifically to help with the dyskinesia. Um, but for me, it's a trade-off because and I'm probably about, in answer to your question, about a couple of hours a day where I'm off, where I can't do much. So the first half an hour in the morning, my dystonia is so bad I can't walk. There'll be periods where I wouldn't be able to have this conversation, but my speech would really slow down. My brain generally just really slows down. I wouldn't be able to get the words out, and all of that sort of lasts for in total probably about a couple of hours a day. I'm okay with that because for me the flip side is I would have to take more medication, and all the downsides that come with the medication. I'm talking about levodopa here. The downsides of dyskinesia and some of the compulsive disorder side effects as well. So, and I think every neurologist or every movement disorder specialist will say this. It's all about you as the individual. What do you need for your day? And the fact that I'm no longer sort of tied to a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 office job, that helps because it's okay that I can be off for a period of time, and I'll just watch TV in that time, or be on the phone to a friend, or try to manage my off time, try to make use of my off time to do the sort of tasks that don't require mental or physical strength, which invariably involves either the internet or the TV. But I'm okay with that. I'm also a big fan of things like massage and yoga, and I feel the positive effects of those um, alternative therapies, and I really believe a holistic condition needs a holistic care approach, and um, I love to sort of um, look for new things. And when it works, you kind of know it works. Um, but at the same time, I've realized, what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another.
yeah, for sure. Manisha says, "Hi, Nainad, love your ping pong." Yes, we love it. And Manisha says, "I think when you are not low, being active becomes compulsive." Um,
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed people. Um, I was talking to somebody at a conference that I was giving a talk at a few months ago. It was targeted at the Asian community, and this young lady, probably about my age. Her elderly mother had Parkinson's, and she was explaining to me that she spent a lot more time at home. And the only thing that she would be doing would be housework, and doing it fanatically.
Mm.
And I said, that's compulsive behaviour. That's that's related to the condition or related to the medication. And punding, a term I've come across recently, that hobbyism, I see come out in different ways with people. And I think also I've seen it in people that exercise. Some people really do exercise, which is great, but obsessively. So you can see that. Probably one of the better compulsions to have it in the scheme of things, but you can see in others, or at least I can see in others, how compulsion manifests in different ways.
Yeah. And I mean, it is, like you said, it's one of the better ones to have, but if you get injured, then you're really stuck, because it is such an part, right? You just want to do just the right amount to get the benefits without getting injured. Maynard says, try ping pong, Kuhan.
Have
you tried it?
He's always telling me to try. I have, and
I mean, you're a tennis player, right? Most tennis
players, exactly. So racket sports and anything ball sports, it's always come naturally to me. And when I first started talking to Anad, I used to think back to about 4 or 5 years ago. The office I was working in had a table tennis in the foyer downstairs, and I used to play every so often. I remember feeling great afterwards, but it wouldn't register to me. I was feeling great because I was playing the table tennis. It wouldn't register to me that actually the particular type of movement and activity that ping pong involves actually is helping with rigidity and stiffness and the slow movement. I didn't, sometimes it's not always apparent when something is good for you until you start sort of taking note. But yeah, I'm a big fan of ping pong. Yeah.
Thomas says, I live in an area where we have free and low-cost exercise programs 5 days per week. I make agreements with other parkies to meet and exercise. That's great. That's really great.
Yeah, I mean, accessibility is a big thing, because if I was still working in terms of an office job, I wouldn't be able to do these things. I wouldn't be able to sort of an online yoga class once a week or an online exercise class once a week. I wouldn't have the time. But the fact that it's been brought online, and one of the, I hate to say it, but one of the blessings of COVID is a lot of things have moved online. A lot more of these services are more accessible now. And as Thomas was saying, that do it with other people, because sometimes you just need that somebody to hold your hand, literally sometimes, and or just motivate you. It's really difficult to do things by yourself with this condition.
Yeah. Is there anything that, or what is your support network like? Like, do you have care partners, and is there anything that you actually have trouble doing these days that you get help with?
Yeah, sure. So I have a partner. The way she describes it, I said to her once, that would you like to talk to other partners? Because there's a care partner support group that I came across, and she's like, well, I don't think of myself as a care partner. The way she puts it is, you're my partner, and I just happen to care for you. The fact that it takes a different dynamic now is largely irrelevant. So but she's great. She's really understanding, and she helps me during the day. So some specific tasks, for example, like I said, first half an hour in the morning, I'm pretty immobile, so she'll do the breakfast and the coffee in the morning, and almost all the housework, because I sometimes just don't have the energy to do it. I feel guilty, and I think a lot of people with Parkinson's feel the burden they place on their partners. It's a very humbling feeling, when you start to lose your independence and you're reliant on others, particularly your loved ones, and certain other actions, like sometimes I can still walk, but I can't run. I can still have a conversation like this for an hour, but not 2 hours. I can still attend a meeting. I can still travel, but maybe not as far, maybe not as nimbly as I did before. I've had to make compromises in every part of my life. But, I'm okay with that, because part of this is just sort of getting old. This would be happening anyway. It's just an accelerated version of it. And I try to find workarounds for things. So if I can't do something with my left hand, I'll try and do it with my right hand. And I find with most of the physical daily tasks, that works. I can compensate. I can find a different way to do it. Where it doesn't work is for the non-motor symptoms. I can't compensate for something like anxiety or apathy or fatigue or in the same way that I can do for like a tremor, for example. So I find that quite challenging. But yeah, I mean, every part of my life is impacted. But I just try to find ways to live with it and to manage it.
Yeah. Polly says, Kuhan, your attitude and approach are contagious, and I could listen to your voice and accent all day. Agreed, Polly. A couple of really takeaways for me, or a couple of things that you said that I've loved the most is the first you said, I don't really consider a glass half empty or half full. It's just a glass of water. I love that. It's just, it's just a glass of water. What am I doing with it? The other one is, you said several times today, I'm okay with that. And I love that. You're not like, oh, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me or the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Here's the situation. This is how I'm managing it. I'm okay with that. And then when you're not okay with it, you figure a workaround. And I think that's a great message for people to learn. But we're before we get off, is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wish I had, or anything that you want to share with our audience that you'd like them to know about, how you live well?
Only in that what I had wished happened to me was there are lots of great resources and great tools out there, but they involve me picking up the phone, or involve me hunting for it, or involve me initiating something. I would have loved if somebody sort of called me and say, hey, I know you've got this condition, we're here for you, or we provide this service. I just wish we move from a kind of reactive approach with living with Parkinson's to a proactive approach where people reach out and help each other. And I see the Parkinson's community do that wonderfully, and that's great. But there is what I call the silent majority in Parkinson's, the sorts of people that aren't watching this video, the sort of people that aren't Googling Parkinson's symptoms, the people that aren't connecting with others or going to support groups, the kind of people that tend to be more isolated, maybe in rural areas that don't meet other people with the condition. I think those are the people that are really in need of our collective support. And I do sometimes think that when we if we assume that everybody is like us and the people that are watching this video, that's great. But we have to understand that the vast majority of people with Parkinson's don't engage in this way. And I think we have a sort of almost a duty to try and reach out to them. There was something else that came to mind, but it's gone at the moment. But the power of reaching out, I guess, is the main theme.
Yeah, that's great. Manisha says, you're doing great, Kuhan. And Naynad says, exactly. Kuhan reflects on ordinary in an extraordinary, simple way. That's why I call him brilliant. Yeah. Thanks for being here, Naynad. Well, thank you so much, Kuhan. It was really great to meet you and lovely to have this conversation. Appreciate that you did it in the evening when it's not the greatest time. So really appreciate that, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future. And we will definitely share your podcast with our community.
Great. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.